This is the convergence. We are the convergence. This is a convergence. A convergence of what? Convergence of revolutions throughout the world. This is the international revolution happening here and now, and it is a permanent revolution. It is ongoing. It is happening. It is happening, and it's happening right now. And we're continuing on with the revolution. Okay, now the question is there a revolution in the Donbass in revolt against the Ukrainian nation state? Or is it a revolution of national liberation of the Ukraine against Russian imperialism? Or is it something else in between? Kara, tell
Something
us.
else in between. So like there's the complicated relationship of like, well, I mean the crazy history between Russia and Ukraine. I mean Ukraine's vied for weird types of independence in the past. Tried to merge with Poland in the 1600s. You had the redomination by Russia in the 17 and 1800s. I've just turned purple for some reason. And then you have what's it um obviously the actual national liberation of the Ukrainian people with 1917. um that complicated history comes into why Ukraine is to certain degrees still oppressed by Russia with their relationship to them, the neo-colonial confines of how Ukraine is split between the Russians and the Americans. At least that's, oh well, the Russians, Americans, and the British. At least that's how it was with the Accords. But the Donbass and the Crimea, they're in a crazy situation because there is a colonized people there that has right to that land, and that's the Tatar people that were ethnically cleansed by Joseph Stalin in the 40s.
Yeah.
Um, and those people, which a large chunk of them still are in Tajikistan, have a right to that land, but they're not the people that are leading Donbass or the Crimea. It's being led by Russian settlers that were sent in the 40s and the 50s, mainly the 50s by Khrushchev, a program that didn't end until the Soviet Union ended, that was supposed to replace the missing population, more like ethnically cleanse, well, Ukraine and the Tatar people of their distinct cultural ties to their own parts of the land. And it's why East Ukraine is, I mean, way more Russian than the Russo-Ukraini that dominated the region prior. Um, and so there's a complicated relationship of Russia is colonizing the Crimea and colonizing Ukraine, while Ukraine is trying to colonize the Crimea and try and undermine, well, maintain its colonization of the Crimea, I should say, and then undermine Russian interests in the region in favor of its NATO masters.
Hmm. Yes, I heard about the Tartars. They were expelled from the Crimea under Stalin's time and never really got back, so that's where national liberation is uh, is crucial, of course. Um, I haven't heard anything from the Tartars themselves. Like, do they have any political
Tatars that are in the region are like
or in
they've been
Dagestan,
pushed.
as you mentioned, are they asking for a right of return? What's going on with them? They have to speak up and find out, like how we can sort of
There already
untangle
was many
this.
who did. There was already many who did engage in a right of return and went back. And
Yes.
because of the Russian invasion, they were pushed into siding with Ukraine because they had no other option because Russia wasn't respecting their right of self-determination. And
Uh,
there was reports as Russian soldiers came in that Tatar people were being like specifically ethnically targeted. So it's kind of a bit of an aggressive repeat of Tsarist history.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. But
Um,
the Donbass for me was not originally part of the Ukraine. It was an adjunct made by Khrushchev upon his intervention with Lenin, who had recognized Ukraine as an autonomous republic in the USSR, with the right of
um,
self-determination if it wanted to become independent, of course. But that didn't include the Donbass. Donbass was only included as a military strategic territorial planning unit in terms of the Civil War that was going on in 1918, 1919. So that's why I'm
well,
mostly sympathetic, to the Russian speaking Ukrainians of the Donbass who've now decided, by referendum to become Russians. And they seem to be treated quite well, given their autonomy within the Russian Federation. So I
The
don't have any
Russian,
objections, to that. And Russia has offered, to stop any military intervention if the eastern regions are allocated, to their proper people there. And that means, now the Russian Federation. So I
but
don't
that
think there's
wouldn't
any
be to their
intention to
proper
go over the
people.
Danube River.
No, no,
Na-
no. Historically,
NATO will never allow that. NATO will never allow that. That's the problem.
Putin would never allow that either. We're talking about an empire here.
Yeah.
Like, not like what would you? So if like some Welsh chauvinists decided to like sell out Wales to England and merge with England, would you support it?
Yeah.
Like, the Donbass is being dominated by Russian settlers. They're not just the traditional Russo-Ukrainians that lived in that region. These are Russians, like no Ukraini, just Russian. Like that's who are dominating that region. And they were from Khrushchev in 1957 or 58. Khrushchev put in plan a settlerization program for what it's now become East Ukraine to refill the lost population, the Tatars, the dead Ukrainians from the war, and other ethnic groups, because Ukraine is incredibly ethnically diverse. And they flooded it with Russians. So we have a problem of a region deciding to be Russian because Russians are in there. This is literally Northern Ireland.
That's the problem. I see.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
these Russians are
Because
bilingual,
it is a
though.
distinct place. There was actually an SSR there, before, and Crimea and the Donbass and all that. They were all part of the same SSR. That's why I kind of just group it all as the Crimea. Calling it Donbass and Luhansk breaks it up and makes them seem like very distinct places from each other. And they are diverse. I mean, Russo-Ukrainians and Tatars did live together a lot, but these were like distinctly Tatar places, and that's why it wasn't a part of Ukraine. It's Turkish.
Mark, you have a familiarity with Ukraine as well, don't you?
Some. We. I'm getting a call from Net. So I'll call him back afterwards.
Yeah.
But the yeah, some. I mean, back when I was a third campist, which I regret having been a third campist, basically following the ideas of Hal Draper, and I still like some of Hal Draper's ideas, but the solidarity group that I belonged to for about a year, only a year, supported Ukraine and basically along with a kind of revisionist Maoist group, came up with this proposal basically saying hands off Ukraine. That was the title of their program, Hands Off Ukraine. And I never really agreed with that, because I know the history of the whole thing. I know why Russia is doing what it's doing. Now, I don't think that there are good guys and bad guys in this thing. I mean, I think Russia is bad, NATO is bad. I have sympathy for the people in Ukraine. I have sympathy for the Russian soldiers who three people get into a tank. If one missile hits the tank, the entire tank blows up, and those three people are killed. So I have sympathy for the people who are basically victims of this whole thing, and they include both Russians and Ukrainians, and they are both being victimized by imperialism. So to me, the major enemy is imperialism, whether it's being practiced by NATO, which started this conflict, or whether it's being practiced by Russia, because nobody asks Ukraine what it wants, and certainly Zelensky is not a very good voice for what Ukrainians want. He himself is a Russian, a descendant of the Russians who emigrated and lived in Ukraine back during Soviet days. It's really hard. I can't see any good guys or bad guys in this. I see victims. Russians are victims and Ukrainians are victims.
I mean, you know, history is never so simple as good guys and bad guys. I mean,
know.
like if imperialism's in the primary, well, Ukraine is a non-imperialist country, or at best regional imperialist, is a lesser, like, fucking, you know, that's an oppressed country we're talking about here. Ukrainians have historically been a colonized people for
Mhm.
hundreds of years. 400 years that the Russian Empire dominated them, and they already had colonization going on even before then. So, like, we gotta understand that this would be like, oh, Ireland has been mean to Northern Ireland, so let's invade and then start
Exactly.
driving tanks straight into their land. So there
Exactly.
is a really important facet that Russia is the is the aggravator, because as an imperialist power, they should be able to find other ways through this. They have economic abilities to deal with this. They could have not couped the Ukrainian government in 2008. You know, like, it starts with the US and NATO if you go all the way back to 1991. But Russia was the one that actually couped the Ukrainian government in the 2000s. And then the US couped the Ukrainian government in 2014. Like, they're both bad as each other when it
Yes.
comes to this, US and Russia. They're spit and spat. Like,
Wait a minute. You know, but Russia still agrees with the Minsk agreement. It's Ukraine who broke the agreement.
Yes.
Russia might agree with the agreement, but they still couped the country. That's breaching the agreement. Like, they did not allow Ukraine to have its own independent democracy because they couped the government with their own little fascists.
Yeah, but you know, this is, you know, like Ukraine is claiming sovereignty. This is what the issue is, you know, like sovereignty over the entire territory of the Ukraine, as if it was God-given, you know, like lines writ, you know, scratched in the earth
Yeah.
by God or something, you know, like really, you know, like sovereignty is shit. Sovereignty is just bourgeois ideology, as far as
Well,
I'm
I mean, it's
concerned.
not true national
Sovereignty is a
liberation.
nation state. Sovereignty is fascism. It leads to fascism. And that's what this whole game is about, you know? Like what we're seeing here is a slow motion invasion of the Russian people again.
I mean, just because the leadership is pushing for sovereignty doesn't mean we shouldn't support Ukrainian people's national liberation. Like, my position isn't pushing any support for the Ukrainian government. They can get fucked. Like, it's just that the Ukrainian people, as an oppressed nation, need NATO and Russia out of their shit. And, like, they're not gonna
Okay,
get that
but
by
Russia,
allowing, they're not
yeah,
gonna they're not gonna get that by allowing Russia to invade them. So what's
but
going
they're
to
not
happen?
invading.
Well,
They're not
they
invading.
are
They're,
in, they
Russia has
are
declared that it's
invading.
not going to cross the Danube.
But
They
they
don't even
will,
need to put
because
up any.
okay. So when Russia took Dagestan, did they not cross into Chechnya?
I have
Like,
no
that's the point I'm
idea.
making. Russia has a reputation for assaulting countries,
Yes.
and they are a part of
As,
the cause
as
for
does
this.
NATO.
And Georgia, yeah, and Georgia
Yeah.
and Afghanistan, but
Exactly.
they withdrew under agreement. Okay,
It doesn't
so
matter. I mean, the US has withdrawn troops from places before under agreement. Like, you can do that. It's like doing the China kills their billionaires, and it's like, okay, Jeffrey Epstein. You know, it's
okay,
there's a lot of
but if Wales wanted to quit the Great Britain and form a federation with Ireland,
I would
shouldn't we
support that.
support
That's
that?
positive. But,
That's
like,
what I think Donbass is doing.
but they're not, because they're not they're like, the Russians there are not a nation. They're settlers.
Well, they call
So
themselves, yeah.
do you think English settlers in, like, east of Wales should just be able to annex that part of Wales because it speaks English now and it's full of English people? So England should come and invade Wales and take that land off them, because the Welsh people are obviously oppressing those English people for being there.
That's what Canada wants to do to West Montreal.
But you see what I mean? It's like there's a big, like, issue where it's not
Okay,
even like Russia's
but
just supporting a national
they're-
liberation. They're supporting a
they're-
nation that doesn't
you
actually
know,
exist.
Yes, but there are these entities called Donetsk and Lugansk. They have their own governments. They have their own elections. They have their own militia, which is fighting against the invading Ukrainian forces. It's Ukrainian that invaded there first. They didn't invade, you know, central Ukraine. They were just defending their own territory.
We gotta understand what defines a nation, because, like, you can't just go and go, well, they've got governments. It's like, and
That's my thesis. You touched on my thesis topic there.
But that's my point, is that they do not define a nation. So them pulling this national
Why
liberation
not?
is a lot of bollocks.
Why do they not define a nation?
What are they? They're Russians.
Well, there's different kinds of Russians. You know, Russian
No,
is
no,
not a
but
nation, one nation,
they're
and Russia is not an
Slavo-Russia then.
ethnicity. Russian is a collection of various nations.
Okay, but they're Slavic Russians, they're West Russians. They're what you would
That's
normally
it.
think
That's
of when you
precisely,
think
you know
of
what I mean? There are
when you
various
think
Russian
of
nations.
when
Yes.
you think of Russians, you're normally thinking of the actual Russian nation and not the federations that they've got in their colonies. And obviously that nation is
Okay,
still
you're talking
technically
about
diverse because
what
you
used to
have
be
the
called White
Germanic
Russia.
and the Slavic. You
Yeah,
have the
you're talking
Germanic
about
and
White Russia, Western Russia, European Russia. Okay.
yeah, the Russia, the actual nation, and not Russia, the entity. Like they're Russian settlers, and so it's a repeat of history, and we have to like understand how
Perhaps.
that element of
Yes,
history
yes, yes.
creates
Okay,
such
let's say you're right.
no empire has ever supported quasi national liberation struggles out of the kindness of their heart. I can say as an Irish woman. Like
Yeah.
Northern Ireland
But
is not some like
okay.
lovely jubbly. Oh well, they're Scottish and they're English, so you know, liberate
Okay,
them.
but Russia's not an empire right now. It's a
Yeah,
federation.
yes, it is. No, definitively, it is an empire. It fits the
Yeah, it's
Lenin's definition of an
capitalist,
empire.
yes, but
No,
capitalist and
no,
an
no.
empire
It's
are two different
imperialist.
things.
No, no, no. It's imperialist. By
Why?
Lenin's definition, it is literally imperialist.
Why?
We can go into its use of finance capital internationally.
Internationally,
It's yes, yes.
they just got ripped off for $300
They're
billion.
literally in Africa. They deployed their fucking Wagner group in Africa. Wagner, Richard
Yeah,
Wagner. It's named after.
That's
yeah,
true.
You know, the fucking Nazi.
yeah, yeah,
And Putin was using them as paramilitary, and we're gonna say
yeah,
that this isn't an empire.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
I don't know.
these guys
Yeah,
are.
I don't think it's an empire, you know, because
Why were they in Syria then? If they're not an empire, they don't have the capacity to be an empire. They have a military that's one of the strongest in the world. They have a nuclear arsenal. They are an economic and military superpower. They're what's it?
yes, they
And
are, but they're still a third world nation.
no, they're not. How are
Why
they a
not?
third world nation? They're an imperialist power. Third world means colonized. Who's
Well,
colonizing Russia?
It means used to be colonized. So no, third world means, you know,
Third
feudal.
world means
Feudal.
colonized. By Lenin's definition, you have the
Lenin's
imperialist
definition was
countries.
third world was, you know, the feudal. Lenin said that Russia was a
No,
third
no.
world country.
Lenin's
That's right.
definition was that it was the colonized countries.
It's
You have
colonized,
the
yes, but more than
imperialist-
that,
have
you
the
know, it's the
imperialist
countries that are
countries, you have
still living in a
you have the-
feudal
you have
economic
the-
system.
You have the imperialist countries, the semi-imperialist, semi-colonial countries, and then you
Yeah.
have the colonized countries. Russia is an imperialist. They are one of the G8, or well, were until they
Well,
got
they
kicked
were,
off
not
of it.
anymore. It's
Yeah, oh,
G7
But
now.
that's what I mean. And
okay.
they're also a member of the UN Security Council, a right reserved for empires like China, like
No,
Russia,
no, it
like
was a
Britain.
right reserved for the Soviet Union that has been
When
transferred
they
to
were an
Russia.
empire after
Right.
they fucking
Soviet
forged their
Union,
way
you can
into
argue
social
that Soviet Union
imperialists.
was an empire too, you know.
They were after the war.
Yeah, because they took over territories that didn't have revolutions of their own, and so they were in a quandary.
Yeah,
They had to
because the
rule
British and the Americans
territories and
them.
do a denazification program in a territory that didn't want to be denazified. Yeah.
Well, the denazification would have likely happened if the Soviet Union had just released them to do whatever they want to do with themselves.
Probably,
like
yeah,
there
yeah.
had already been massive anti-fascist like brigades struggling to take power, and the Soviet Union could have just supported them through their aims.
Yeah.
But instead, they sat with the British and the Americans in 1943, and they signed the Potsdam Declaration, which gave them complete security control over everything up to the border in Germany. They would have had more territory, but Churchill specifically sabotaged the war so that the British could take more territory from the Russians. But yeah, that deal was basically the signing in of like social imperialism for the Soviet Union.
And that's what
they
sunk
could
the
have
Greek
reversed
Revolution.
course, but that didn't happen.
And so the Greek Revolution was sabotaged by Russia.
Yes,
Yeah.
to maintain peace with the British.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Incredible.
and Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia was threatening the Russians that if they sent aid, they would bomb they would shoot down the planes.
But anyway, let's here now celebrate the victory of the Red Army. Okay, let's go for it. Yay!
Damn, I wish I had a pipe so I could quickly celebrate. You know, you got an advantage here.
I don't
what's
smoke, so I have no. I don't have a pipe.
You have
one
a
of
glass of wine or something?
I don't have any liquor or beer or. I think I have Bud
A
Zero.
glass of water? A glass of water is fine.
This is water.
Yeah, man. Okay, okay.
yeah, man.
Yeah. So, yeah. So my mother's brother, whose name was Meyer, was a partisan. First, he set up the Underground Railway to get the women out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Then he was a partisan after Russia invaded the Soviet Union. And then he was conscripted into the Red Army. So my uncle Meyer Goldstein was part of the Red Army that won the war.
That's blessed. That's a wonderful
Isn't it?
honor.
Yeah, that's where I get my
Your fucking radical tendencies from.
my determine. In political terms, I call it determination. In American,
Your determination to stick your foot up the ass of the bourgeoisie.
yes, and whereas other people would have given up like decades ago, but in American speak, I think it's called moxie or New York speak. Moxie, is that right, Mark?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yes,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Moxie.
My father was an expert at it. So was my uncle.
Moxie, yes. In Yiddish, it's called chutzpah, but you have to
Chutzpah,
pronounce it. No, you have to pronounce it correctly. Chutzpah.
Chutzpah, yes.
No, not chutzpah. Chutzpah.
How do you say it?
Chutzpah.
It's like a
Chutzpah. Isn't
No, not chutzpah.
I am. My mic.
That's it.
My mic isn't picking it up. It's chutzpah. I know it's.
That's it. Yeah.
Like
Well,
like
you
the
got to
Scottish,
put the emphasis in there, otherwise it doesn't get
like
picked
the
up
Scottish-
precisely. You know, like chutzpah, you have to put it out there. Yeah.
You've got to buy a microphone that isn't anti-Jewish and won't silence you. Like, you need to
It's multilingual. Yeah.
multilingual microphone. That would be like if I saw someone buy that, I would be like, I've got a house in the middle of this, like a beachfront property in the Sonora to sell you.
Well, that's the way that Arabs can always tell if somebody has a Hebrew background who is speaking Arabic, because they make no distinction between the Arabic ha and the Arabic ha. They pronounce both as ha. That's the way.
Yeah.
Now I can
Yeah.
do it,
Mhm.
but most people who speak Hebrew can't.
Yeah.
You know, I'm terrible now because I learned how to like do the kha and the kha. It started coming up in English and like other stuff. Like when I'm speaking Irish, it'll happen sometimes. I'm just like, why am I speaking Irish like in Arab? I don't even know how to speak Arabic. It's that solidarity. It runs deep.
Speaking of Arabic, the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, are leading a world revolution now.
They're at the center of it in many ways.
You know, the United States is under pressure. You know, they've cut down their military supplies to Israel by half, and Israel's Netanyahu's complaining. This is just covered in the news report, you know, that I shared on my email list and on my Facebook, which is a collection of 5,000 readers. So, you know, we're getting out there, you know, like finally, you know, there's a breakthrough happening, and our critiques of the normality of genocide is being heard.
Yeah, but it's not going to matter in the long term. I mean, this is a short-term victory. Biden is still a Zionist, and he may have cut back a little bit under pressure from his party, and because he wants to win the election. But after November, whoever is elected, whether it's Biden or Trump, they will go back into full swing in supporting Netanyahu or Gallant or whoever is prime minister at that time. Won't matter.
But they're already backing down. Biden's already backing down. Like I mentioned, you know, he's cut back, you know, military supplies, ammunition by half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now
that slows down, you know, the genocide, of course, you know, but it doesn't stop the genocide.
It doesn't
even
stop.
if they lose US support, they still have Chinese support. China is now the world's largest trader with Israel, and they send a lot of weapons stuff to Israel, especially drone technology. So Israel's still
Really?
got their partner with China, and Russia's a pretty big trade partner
I
with
didn't know. I
Israel as
didn't know they were
well.
getting stuff from
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah,
But
one of the largest European settler groups in Israel is Russian, actually.
yes, yes, yes. So there's 2 million Russian Jewish people, or people who claim to be Jewish, who are more
Yeah,
than a
there's
third,
a
like
problem with
Christian.
some. There's a problem in. I don't know if it's all over, but I know Russia has a bit of an issue with people just claiming Judaism with no
Yeah.
relation at all, and it's. Oh my God, why?
But because settlers or squatters, in the Zionist state, they get a lot of subsidies. There was one taxi driver who was explaining it to me, and I was thinking, like he goes through about 3, like subsidies that he gets, as a settler in Jerusalem. And I thought that was it, he was just pausing to breathe, then then he went on, and kept on going on, and I should have recorded it, like it was incredible. The number of
damn.
subsidies, that are provided, for squatters there. Oh, but Lebanon, Israel, Netanyahu, they're planning, to engage with Hezbollah inside Lebanon. They think they can.
They want to take
And
over if they can.
yeah, if they
Cannot.
can, they want to take over southern Lebanon, so they can get their
And there's been
settlers,
soldiers in
squatters.
with the Greater Israel patch on their fucking arm.
Yeah, I just shared that. Incredible, Now, the United States has refused to jump into any such escalation. They've already declared it, to Israel, that if Israel goes in after Lebanon and Hezbollah, the United States is not going to be helping out. I mean, they're probably going to be helping out, with ammunition and everything, but to some limited extent, they're not going to send boots on the ground into Lebanon or anything like that.
If
They
Bibi
said
wasn't such
the
close
same.
friends, Bibi wasn't such close friends with King Hussein, Bibi would go right into Jordan as well. I mean, it's all. I mean,
No, Jordan is not a threat.
Do you know why
not
Jordan's
Lebanon,
useful
that's a
as
threat.
well? Is because Jordan is still a
Israel
Jordan.
wants Jordan.
They do
They want-
No, they
eventually.
don't. There's 2
Well,
million Palestinian refugees in Jordan. They don't want them.
They
They
will
want them to
eventually.
be taken care of by Hussein.
They will want it eventually because
No,
it's
they
a
want the
part of.
land.
It's a part of Greater Israel. Like
You
it
think
is a
they're
part of what they
ethnic
eventually
cleansing?
want.
Oh
But
yeah, in the long term.
But
not the people, the land.
But
Yeah.
it's useful for now to remain as it is because unlike the other countries around them, Jordan is still pretty much a British colony. Like, yeah, it's got nominal independence and stuff like that, but Britain and America pretty much dominate Georgia's politics.
Yeah.
Jordan's politics, sorry, Georgia, Jordan. But I will say, both in agreements and in criticism of what you say, yeah, it won't matter too much in the long run, specifically the backing off, but it could if people keep protesting. People shouldn't go, oh, they're starting to back off. This is okay. It was right for workers to go for a 10-hour workday instead of an 8-hour workday when they were working 12 hours a day. But it was also right for them to fucking be pissed off the moment they got a 10-hour workday and it wasn't good enough. People need to remain pissed off and not be like, well, we didn't really expect them to budge that much. They've started budging. It's like universities will say they'll think about divesting, and then they'll close the encampment. What are you doing? They haven't even decided on it yet. And even if they did, why would you close the encampment? Universities have influence. Get them to actually start influencing for pro-Palestinian stuff. Make it not enough. And keep pushing. These encampments shouldn't just be in the universities anyway. They should be fucking shutting down cities. Not this whole oh, but you're gonna wind the workers up. It doesn't matter. You're gonna shut the whole fucker down. The city's gonna.
Well, it's the war production factories that have to be taken on. The source of the problem.
Well, it's also commerce as well. Like commerce needs to be brought to a
and
halt.
any banks that finance like Scotiabank, like any banks that finance, war production
Barclays,
as well.
and all that lot.
All the private banks, basically,
I've heard NatWest is actually like one that isn't supporting Israel. So like a lot of the
Well, is it a credit union, a co-op, a cooperative bank? That's what I'm a member of.
Yeah, no, I might move to Co-op Bank. I'm not sure, but like NatWest is said to be one that people are choosing here as well, the anti-Israel.
Yeah.
Are co-op banks what we call credit unions in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of. They're a little different, but basically the same. Like they're banks that are actually ran by one of those like used to be middle class turned bougie co-ops from the early 20th century. Cooperatives in the UK are wild. My town actually has one of the largest independent cooperatives in the region, and then they knocked down a fucking department store. To build a college in the town center. And I just think that's a bit like, wouldn't it be better to have the college next to like really close to the town center and then have the town center like maximalized for what it can be used for? Also, isn't
Yeah.
it going to be like a really uncomfortable environment to be learning in, to be like around the noise of a town center? Because they're not like the quietest places ever.
Well, as long as you don't have a train, driving right through the center of the town like they do here in Canada, and then
Well,
blows
about
up,
that.
blows up in the center of the town,
Close up.
and then they don't even shut down the rail line, they just fixed it up, so it could happen again.
What's it? Yeah, the train actually is just over there. Like, I'm at the outskirts of the town though. Like, I'm a walk away from the farms.
Yeah, I've got a train going behind me here as well. But they only travel at nighttime so people don't see them, So people think the tracks are not being used.
Here, the tracks are not used. We have tons of tracks all over the
And
place.
who knows what they're passing down those
Oh,
tracks too.
you're near some of those. Are you near some of those old 1800s tracks, Mark?
Yeah, I don't know. I think at one time there was a railroad that came down here, but there's nothing. It's just tracks. And everywhere you go, you see train tracks.
One
Just
of them.
blocks from me, there are train tracks that go down Business 83, but I've never seen a train go down those rails.
They might be the old mining tracks
I
because,
think
like,
so.
US,
Yeah,
when the US standardized their rail, they left a load of like tracks
yeah,
just for
exactly.
dead.
Yeah.
And like what ended up happening is that like the ones they did standardize were freight lines. Anything that wasn't a freight line kind of got left to the dust, and that's why the US looks like it has about 4 rail lines throughout the whole country. I mean, it has more than that, but um like Texas is one of the southern states that I think is like, if you look at like actual train tracks, it's slightly better, but I think most of them are unused, so it's just like, wow. Yeah, the US train travel is useless.
Oh yeah, it's like obsolete. Yeah.
Well, it's
But
not that. It's not that
now
good.
the
It-
problem is not the train tracks in the
Oh.
United States of America. The problem is Israel is going to be moving into southern Lebanon there, probably
Yes,
up to the Litani River.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. That means there's going to be resistance, not just, by Hezbollah. There's also going to be the international Iranian Revolutionary Corps, which is, right next door, that could get involved in that. In fact, they would take that as an opportunity to, take back the Golan Heights, which are still being occupied. So
well, I
they
mean,
can move
Syria.
into the Golan Heights from Syria. And
The
then
thing
Iraq,
is
like they can just, use missiles from Iraq that's close enough, to take on the military.
so
Well, Iran is now saying that it plans to have nuclear weapons by this November, and that is a pledge that the Ayatollah Khomeini made, that it will have nuclear weapons by November, and that is
believe me.
entirely
I've never
caused
seen
by.
this. Where did you get that?
Yeah, it was,
They said it in response
yeah,
to
it
the
was
attacks.
it was today. It was a story
Today,
today. Today, yes.
I've seen that they say they have declared that they have the potential to make a nuclear weapon,
Well, they
but that
said
they hadn't
after that they
intended to
were
do
going
so.
to start working on a nuclear weapon after the attacks.
They
Now,
mentioned November.
Because what I'm seeing is a widening war, like even though Gaza seems to be winding down with the lack of ammunition from the United States and the ceasefire proposal, which doesn't even include a complete withdrawal of the Zionist military from Gaza, just a withdrawal from populated areas, which means what? Who knows? So Hamas is not going to agree to that. So this low-level, guerrilla warfare is going to continue, like in Vietnam, for a long time. And now they want to jump into Hezbollah land. Okay, well, then it becomes a regional war.
Here is
Iran,
here is what the Arms Control Association says. This is not the story I read before, but it's a
what
kind of
association is that? From where?
it's
American
let's
or
see,
Iranian?
Washington D.C.
It's American. Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but Iran did
Iran
confirm like months
accelerated
ago
its
that they
production
were.
of uranium. Iran accelerated its production of uranium which enriched to near weapons grade levels, and that it is producing approximately 9 kilograms of uranium and pledges to reach the level of weapons the level of weapon strength by November of this year. That's according to the Arms Control Association. That is not as good as the story I saw before, but it's pretty much
So
the same
that
thing.
means that they're claiming that Iran has the capacity to upgrade its uranium purification
Well,
process
so
from 60%, which is what they had before, to
Yes.
93%, which is what required for weapons grade. But what
Well,
they mean by
yeah.
weapons grade, is undetermined, because they could be talking about a potential dirty bomb, which is not,
which
a nuclear bomb, but it's, a radioactive bomb. So I
yeah,
don't trust that American source. No.
Okay. Okay.
I do remember like Iran making a response saying if Israel targeted their nuclear facilities, that there would be problem. And in consideration of that, they said that they were going to gear up for deterrent production. They basically said, fuck this. The agreement isn't on at the moment, so we're not going to follow it. We're just going to move on. We're doing our thing. And I will get into, so Syria, there's a 50-50 chance they'll help because like what if they're going to help with Lebanon, why didn't they help with Palestine? Like what, they're all of a sudden going to give a shit when Lebanon gets invaded but not Palestine? And then you have Iran, who only gave a shit when Israel targeted them, and the creating of nuclear weapons, that's not to attack them, that's to prevent them having to get in a war. That's them trying to go, yo, we're giving you a reason to not touch us, stay the fuck away from our shit. So this doesn't sound like very good solidarity for Palestine. It sounds like countries trying to avoid getting their fingers dirty because Iran's a regional imperialist and Syria are cucks to other empires like Russia and
That could
China.
very well be. Yeah. But
So
I've also heard, Iran declare that they have the potential to develop a nuclear device, nuclear explosive device,
it's
but
not a
they
thing
haven't
you tend
decided
to
to
just
do
normally
so.
go
So
throwing
just the
around, though, is
potential
it?
is the deterrent that they're holding up.
But
Okay,
but
fine.
it's not something you would typically go throwing around if you weren't meaning it as some kind of threat or deterrent. Like that's the kind of thing. Like if they're throwing stuff like that out, they're spitballing shit, which means that they've already been considering this for a while.
They've also declared that they refuse on principle, to make and use a nuclear explosive device as well. So that's still in effect. But then, that's the religious edict. What is it called? Fatwa.
But they've
But the
betrayed
government is
religious
another
edicts
matter.
before.
The government is another
Yeah, the
matter.
government is another matter. Yeah, because the red Shia that were in the revolution that were fucking slaughtered in the party and the communists that were a part of the coalition. The slaughter of them is absolutely a
Yeah,
brutalization of Islamic edicts. Like,
yeah. That's where the family of Iranian communist refugees came to Montreal, and the son of the father who was in the Communist Party, he became the one of the spokespeople for the Quebec Solidaire Party here in Quebec, which took on the major bourgeois parties, whether nationalist or not, and won up to 10 seats in the legislature as basically understood as a socialist party, even as a socialist revolutionary party, and for the independence of Quebec as well. So, that's one of the leftovers, the Iranian civil war there. Yeah, it came here to Montreal.
God, Iranian, like principled Iranian communists are a fucking delight to speak to. like such fucking fluent speakers of Marxist theory while being like not like first world motherfuckers when they think they're like the big I am, so down to earth. And that's like the case with like, you know, most brethren from colonized countries. Like
Yeah.
you know, there's just this greater sort of down to earth thing. And with Iran, obviously it's a complicated place because it's a colonizer country that also colonizes itself internally, kind of like the British, if you think about the British as an entity rather than the separate countries in it.
Mm.
Iran has that same character, and you tend to come across communists that don't tend to be of the Persian-Aryan heritage. They're more of the let's say like the fucking. How can I not remember the names of the other groups? Shit,
In
I can remember
Iran,
the
yeah, I don't
Afghan
know
names
myself.
for them.
Turkmani?
Yeah,
Uh,
but there's like loads of ethnic groups in Iran, like
yeah.
so.
All of the Oriental countries are multinational. You know, this
Azer-
nation state concept is
Azerbaijani.
solely European, you know, and then they try to impose it on the rest of the world. Well, you're too late, you know, like no way can that work.
I mean, you
No
get into
I
way.
mean,
Iran and in Soleimani, it's a combination. It's primarily Arabic speaking, and there are a lot of people there who know no Persian at all. I had a friend now deceased, Esmail Siapush. He knew no Persian at all, but he was from Iran.
Uh,
um, the nation state is not a purely European thing. The theory was developed by Hegel, that's for sure.
Mhm.
yeah.
But nation states already existed before Hegel dropped his theory out, just not the bourgeois like full conception of it. Like
In Europe.
because Asia was going down the same trajectory of development. Even if Europe had never entered Asia, they would have gone down the same development for capitalism. Europe and Asia, or Eurasia, has had a
Oh,
pretty identical development profile throughout their existence. And Europe and Asia both have the same thing of having multiple ethnicities in there, but having one specific ethnicity dominate the shit out of them. And Iran is probably one of the best countries to talk about. Actually, you can't just talk about Iran. You have to talk about Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and the rest of the Central Asian republics. You have to talk about Pakistan and
yes, but
India because of
you have
because
to
if
resort
we
to
want to
a
look, if we want to
materialist
look at
analysis set here.
if we want to look at like one of the most European the things that usually stereotype as European but we can see throughout Asia as well is it's that the Persian
Okay, but
oppression.
you're going too far. Okay, you're far and
But
wide, you know,
do
because
these separate
it's not a
groups not
nation state
define
that creates
themselves as their
capitalism. It's
own
capitalism
nations
that
and then
creates a
form their
nation
own
state.
states?
Yes.
You know,
You know, the
like
development of capitalism, you know, in the third world was creating nation states. Okay, in spite of the sociological demographics. Okay, but
no, yeah, I'm
it's
not
capitalism
disagreeing
that
with
creates
that,
nation
but we're
state, and not the
talking.
nation
No,
state that creates capitalism.
I'm not disagreeing with that. But when we're
Mhm.
specifically talking about an imperialist country historically like Persia, it's obviously not the case there. Persia actually was a big inspiration to the Western powers when it came to defining the way that they looked at themselves. The British, you know, the whole British thing of every time they meet, they have to have a cup of tea and some biscuits, and that's a rule. Like if you
Yeah,
meet any statesman, they have to have a cup of tea and they gotta drink that motherfucker.
yeah.
That's a Persian thing. That comes
Uh,
straight from the
It is,
Persians.
yes.
And the
It's
Persians
also true in
themselves see
Afghanistan.
themselves as the equivalent to the British in the region, and not because they're like necessarily just imitating British customs and stuff, because they see the connections that British imperialism has to a lot of historical like Persian cultural traditions around imperialization, and so there's this crossover where now they're adopting stuff from the British. But we can talk about a lot of places like this, like China. China was like building empires while Europe was still shitting and throwing it at walls.
well, yeah, the Han Empire.
Feudalism was developed first in China before it was developed in Europe. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and feudalism would have brought a trajectory towards capitalism if it's followed to its economically determined means. Like it's not a guaranteed thing. I'm not one of these linearists where like, ooh, you have to go for capitalism after feudalism and blah blah blah, because Marx wasn't even one of those. Like that's just some bullshit people
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
ascribed to
yeah, yeah.
Marx like a moron. But I will say that like Asia and Europe, for the most part, have a very similar trajectory and development because it's not linear either for both of them. there's oppressed and oppressor nations in both that have completely different conceptualizations. Think about it, like what use was the nation state concept to the Slavic people when it was first introduced? Like, oh, all these people that literally are defined by them belonging to the Russians or the Germans or whichever empire they belong to at any given time. Like, fuck, like it just means nothing at that point. What, are you going to call them the Slavic nation? Well, that doesn't mean jack
No.
shit really, because they're not a nation. They're not a nation. They're many nations, and then you have like all the
Yeah,
distinct
and they
Slavic
love killing
cultures.
each other. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, yeah, that's the goal. But so it becomes this whole like situation where those Slavic peoples that are all these different distinct nations, they're building up pieces from being destroyed, and so like the problem is that, I mean, you can't avoid a state at the moment. State needs to wither away, but a lot of these states have gotten
That's a
caught
long
up
time.
in the construction of bourgeois states. And those bourgeois states are absolutely latched to the nation state concept. They can't leave it. They never
Yeah.
would.
Yeah,
Even in
a
bourgeois,
nation state is
even in
basically,
bourgeois,
council of the bourgeoisie, so yeah,
and
you can't have a nation state without a bourgeoisie.
so like it's I mean, Stalin points this out very importantly as well about national liberation. National liberation does not always mean getting a state. For a nation that is like dominant on a land in a region, because we live in a bourgeois world, you kind of need one. If you don't have like a state, you're gonna die. But like not all peoples have like a right to a land. They need a right to a national liberation. We've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, the
Like,
numbers
well,
is, 194 nation states registered in the United Nations, whereas in the world there are 3,000 nations.
exactly, singing the
The
magic.
United Nations
And
is just a temporary thing, it's got to be,
and no,
expanded into the whole world. And the
nations will
Security Council
always
has to go. No more
nations.
vetoes.
The United
It would
Nations
be no
is
Israel
like
if it were not for the
the United Nations is like basically already just a dick puppet of America.
Yeah.
It's like
it is now. It is
I
now.
mean, when China takes over, they'll end up making it its dick puppet, and the UN will have to oblige. That's the kind of system the US set up for itself. I can't wait to see them bitch about it. The communists, they took over the UN. Britain,
Yes.
we need to use the war
Yes,
with
yes.
China. I would keep an eye on Britain right the fuck now, because I would be concerned that the British want to form just a full-on like economic alliance with the US. That's concerning. That's not just NATO, where it's a military eco alliance where it's mainly centered on defense. That's a full-falutin' the everything military trade and everything in between. Let's get nice and ooga booga tight together. And so the US, they were like this with the British and the French throughout the 20s and the 30s. And what did they do when the Great Depression happened? Rather than panic about the possibility of revolution, which they didn't seem to do until like 1933. Well done, guys. Actually, if you read Roosevelt's stuff, it was more like 36 for the bourgeoisie. Real dealing with the problems in the US. The bourgeoisie was too focused on exploiting the issues that were going on in Europe because of the Great Depression. Because while the Great Depression was the Wall Street crash, just like the crash of the US empire will be confusingly probably attributed to some major crash in China, it was actually the crash of the British Empire's economic structure. I mean, all the empires were tied to the British at this point in time. There isn't this monopolar, multipolar world bollocks like the fucking fascists that call themselves Marxists, the mega communists, go on about. But there is a flexing where the dominant imperialist wants to just be the only imperialist. And so there's times where they do manage to get a crux on everyone. 1922 was Britain's domination of the entire world, basically, through the League of Nations. Yeah, France and the US kind of had power on it, but who the fuck were the French and the US bitches to? So it's like that kind of dynamic where the US then muscled their way in they were doing Workshop of the World. I mean, why else do you think they were so willing to produce tanks for the British and the French? They're making loads of profit off of being the construction forum, and they're already doing stuff like that before then. Rolls-Royce and other companies like that were exporting to America for the cheaper labor. What's it? So they were developing their finance capital basis whilst investing in Nazis and pushing for the war to destabilize Europe. The bourgeoisie, I mean, I don't know how much the US government was aware of this stuff, but the bourgeoisie was trying to start a hailfire in Europe so it could fix it up with its capital and then basically just dominate loads of countries. That's why the British turned down the loans that they were being offered. Like they tried to take as little as they could that would have them having to pay back the US for really good reason. Like what we saw is then that shift of power. The British, the EU, they're gonna try to do the same. They're like the British aren't gonna cling to the US because, oh, protect me. You know, they're gonna cling to the US because they're gonna wait for the moment when they can pounce and take advantage of them. So I would watch the motherfucking British right now, especially given that whilst Israel technically arose out of an opposition to the British, that is not a lie the Zionists tell. That is true to a degree.
The British,
Because
they
the
trained
British
Zionist
lied,
military.
the British lied to them and didn't actually fulfill their Zionist policy because they never intended to. It was they just wanted Palestine, like, and so the British set themselves up. But those Zionists still ended up being the British as well as the Americans' assets after the fact. Like, yeah, they shot at the British and they took territory that belonged to them, but I mean, the US and the British didn't fall out. Well, okay, they fell out a little bit, but not too much about it. And the Israelis and the British became very quick friends moments after that. And you know, Britain was on a fucking like hellfire crisis after the war because the US had took like big chunks of its empire, like politically, and even in certain ways economically, because the UK had to like sell off some of its colonies. You also have like Egypt and all that, where they vied for independence and the British invaded with the Suez Crisis. We're going to see that with the US. Like, someone's going to take the dominance from them. It's going to likely be China, but the EU and British, I would be careful of those two, and then to a lesser degree, the Russians. And
China's not alone. I don't think one can speak about China in and of itself. You know, we're talking about BRICS. We're talking about BRICS
BRICS
now.
is China's entity. That's China's thing.
Not anymore. It's too big. It's the third world. It's a third world revolt.
No,
it's a resistance
not.
organization.
China's an imperialist country.
Perhaps, but it's
it
also in revolt against the like, U.S. Empire, which is still dominant.
And
like China's only at about 20% of the power of the United States.
The Nazis were against the British.
Yeah.
That's where that argument goes. The Nazis were against the British. China's committing a genocide in its own country right now. Several, actually, if you look further than just the Uyghurs, because it's not just the Uyghurs they're genociding.
Not that I know
you also
of.
have the Tibetan people. You also have South Chinese people that are under threat. Like, you know, they just ship Uyghur people to the east of the, they ship Uyghur people to the east of the country, as well as Tibetan people to go work, which is the part of the genocide, the Tibetan people, stripping people from their land without their will to go work. How far across the country? Bigger than the United States. It would be bigger than going from California to like New York to go work and live for the rest of your life, and your family might not ever see you again. You might get to go back, maybe, just maybe, but you might also end up jumping out of those factories and killing yourself. China is a fascist country, and fascist imperialist countries don't support revolutions. If they did, why would China be arming Duterte and Marcos in Philippines against the Maoists? Literal fascists that are committing genocide in the Philippines are being armed by China to stop a communist revolution. The most developed, most advanced revolution in the world right now.
Okay, but I mean? they're still a third world country. Even though they're industrialized, they're industrialized third world country. Third world has become
China is a first world country.
A political entity and not an economic entity necessarily.
No, China is a first world country. It's an empire. It is the largest market holder in Africa right now, all over Africa, and has been since 2006. It's an empire, and it has been since the bourgeoisie took over in 1976. They couped the country and shut down the Cultural Revolution, reverted its progress, and went back to imperialism. They're not the communists, and they don't care for communism. They are opposed to the US in the same way the
Yes,
revisionist
well,
Soviets
you
were,
know,
for their
like,
own imperialist
but,
interests.
you know,
They
like
want to dominate.
the Soviet Union under the bureaucratic leadership, you know, was also imperialist, if
Yes,
you want
and
to
they committed
use the term in a
atrocities.
broad sense of the term, you know. So what? But
No,
the
no, it's
fact
not
is
so
that
what.
it's part of a bigger game.
Imperialism is the primary contradiction.
Mhm.
Not
It
just
is.
US imperialism, not just British imperialism, all imperialism. Fuck China and fuck the US. Colonies should be revolting against both, because so you revolt against the US and now you're China's colony. So
Yeah,
what's
but
changed? What's
okay, look,
changed?
okay,
No.
okay,
You revolt
okay,
from the US and you're now China's colony. Tell me what's changed.
okay. So, okay, let me put you. Let me put it forward to you as a hypothetical. You know, like, you have all sorts of, you know, third world countries that are rich in natural resources because they happen to be in that part of the world. Okay, so you have Algeria with its oil production. You have Venezuela, you know, with its oil production, and you have the third world countries which are now, you know, richer than rich. You know, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera.
Saudi
This is the
Arabia's
third
second
world,
world.
you know, which is
Saudi Arabia's
liberating
second
itself.
world. Saudi Arabia's second world. It's an inter-imperialist
Okay,
country.
they've changed now. The second world, okay, yeah, sure. Okay,
No,
so
no,
they're
but that's what
all
second
these,
world
you know,
means.
like
Second world
third
is for
world
the
countries are
inter-imperialists.
using oil to upgrade their status into, you know, some sort of, you know, something that's not third world, you know, so they're no longer, you know, like a colonial bastion. Okay,
be
but at the
updating
same
itself
time,
into a
these
colonial.
revolutions that are doing this are killing the world because they're selling oil when they shouldn't be. Oil should be left in the ground, right? So they're counter-revolutionary in another sense. So the revolutions are counter-revolutionary at the same time. You know, it's everything is, you know, like fucked up like that.
have to
Everything
work
is, you know,
within your means.
dialectical. You know, so just because China, you know, does some nutty things, you know, doesn't mean that it is, you know, equivalent, you know, to the United States of America.
But they are, because they're imperialist. Like, they are an imperialist superpower. First world, not second world, where they're an inter-imperialist. They're not just a regional imperialist. They are dominating South America and Africa and places all over Europe as well.
Economically, yes. Economically.
Yes, but they don't have 800 military bases.
What defines bourgeois political power? Economics. Politics is economics in command. So, like, it is political control as well. It's not just economic. It's so,
yeah,
like,
political, but they don't have the military because they don't have 800 military bases in the world.
They do have the military, but they don't need to use it. Imperialism is not defined by military action. They have political control over countries because they have economic control. Economic control is what grants political control.
That is an exaggeration to say that China has political control over all these countries.
Please let me finish. Politics is economics in command. My alarm would shut the fuck up. Politics is economics in command. And so when we're looking at this relationship, China is a world power influencing the world to profit off of itself. What good is China doing for the world that when it goes into fucking any country and forms a deal with them, it's give us 45% of your resources and then we'll work together? What is that, them really supporting the liberation of the country? And I don't care if the US takes 55%. What, are we going to go lesser of evilism? Should we just go, oh, well, you know, the US will oppress the Irish less than the British, so let's just give Ireland to the US? Because they probably will. They probably will oppress us less than
the first question in that example. The first question in that example is, what Chinese agency are you talking about? Is that a private sector?
No, I'm on
or is
about
it the public sector?
I'm on about the Chinese government.
It's probably the private sector that is going after the resources there. Not the Chinese state sector.
No. I'm on about a trade deal. I'm on about a trade deal. That's the government.
Yes.
Yes, the Chinese state gets that much, and also the companies that are allowed. No. The only companies that are allowed to operate abroad have to be members of the Communist Party, full members of the Communist Party. Otherwise, you cannot operate as a capitalist abroad. Also, why do they have capitalists? why do they have capitalists abroad if they're not an empire?
Because they have the
definitive.
governmental,
That's definitive. No, no, no.
relations with the country, like they lend money to a country and then they forgive them the loan and stuff like that. That's what's happening with China, like it's no big deal.
No. That's not what loan forgiveness means. No. Don't look at the word loan forgiveness. No. This is what loan forgiveness means. Loan forgiveness means we take your port, we take the things we made, and then you still owe us money. Yes, they did it in Sri Lanka. I can go find you
state loan, I can go find you.
No. I can go find you sources about Sri Lanka where they sent troops in. China is an imperialist country. Why are they giving loans? What is a loan? What kind of capital is a loan? What kind of capital? Is it just banking
for
capital?
Trading purposes? So they would have yuan, to buy goods from China. It's business.
No. There's one word I needed. Finance capital. That's what it is. What is finance capital? It's the defining factor of imperialism. The defining factor. The merger of banking and industrial.
So then
capital.
Why did they forgive the loan then? If they were
because it's about political economic interest.
Okay, so it's political. It's not finance capital.
It is finance capital. I said they forgive the loan for political economic interests.
That's it. That's what's dominant is the politics.
Because if they don't, the US will take over it. Why do you think they do better deals?
Yes. Okay,
if you're gonna get people into your empire,
that's
what are you gonna do?
Okay,
come in like the last one? The Americans did a better deal than the British. Do you think the Americans
the
were
United States of America. That's what's leading us into a third world war. That's what's happening.
No, China is too. Both of them are. They both have an interest in dominating each other. Why do you think China has been threatening to invade Taiwan?
China has offered to send peacekeeping troops into Gaza to keep out the Zionist military.
But they won't stop their trade with Israel.
Well,
the BDS doesn't apply to China.
No, I'm talking about the government. I'm talking about China, the state,
No, yes, China, the state, has not stopped its trade with Israel or illegalized their bourgeoisie.
Neither has Morocco or Saudi Arabia or Qatar.
China also supported the war on terror. Like, you're missing so much about China. China has been a bourgeois country since 1976. They couped it, a counter-revolution. What happens when the bourgeoisie develop? They turn imperialist. It is a guaranteed element of their development. You cannot reach a developed stage of capitalism to the point where you have billionaires without being imperialist. Literally. Imperialism is what creates billionaires, and China has thousands of them. Thousands.
Okay, but they don't control the state.
They're in the bloody party that controls the state.
Yes, but they don't control the Communist Party.
Also, the leader of the country is a capitalist. He owns private property. His son is a fucking landlord and a fucking energy capitalist. So, like, yes, they do control the state.
No big deal there,
like ever since they couped it. No. So do you think Deng Xiaoping, a guy who called for capitalist restoration, thinks that the bourgeoisie should not be in control? When he then invited them into the Communist Party? So the Communist Party is supposed to stop the capitalists from influencing the government, but they let the capitalists into the party. It's oxymoronic.
But they don't control, the party. They don't control the legal apparatus as well. They're put into prison by the legal apparatus.
So a bourgeoisie in America.
The bourgeoisie, in prison.
So a bourgeoisie in America. No, that's one of the most bullshit arguments ever. Arresting the bourgeoisie is not usurping the bourgeoisie. Like, Jeffrey Epstein was killed. I guess America is now a communist country.
He was killed because he was Jewish. Not because
he was killed. No, he was killed because he had deets on everyone. They stopped him from releasing
because he was Jewish.
But like,
he was also a Zionist.
The bourgeoisie absolutely get killed in other countries, and they're not socialist all of a sudden. The Chinese system is economically capitalist, it's politically capitalist, and its authorization is capitalist.
Okay, but in the developing world war that's happening now, is China against the United States of America or together with the United States of America?
But that's is it really? Is there only two sides? Are you forgetting the colonized countries? Because you're talking about two imperialist sides. So in the
It's a war
developing World
between
War,
BRICS and the United States of America
World War
and its
One,
British allies.
so where did the Bundists and the Bolsheviks sit about World War One? Did they side with Russia over the Germans because Russia is objectively a more oppressed empire? No, they stood against imperialism as colonized people revolting. And the colonizers, the great Russians, they stood against their own colonizer heritage to decolonize. That was the response. That needs to be the response. There needs to be the response, especially in a country like China, where the Han are colonizing people. And Mao talked about this. Mao talks about the possibility of Han chauvinism taking over again, and it has. It has so much.
Why would you want to compare, a feudal economy with a developed, liberated, nationally liberated, third world?
China is
that's on the ground, taking on, its imperial masters.
Okay, so when the British were investing in Africa in the 50s and forgiving loans and giving out free loans, they were developing the third world. They were liberating the people from their destitutes for a fee, though, and for parts of their trade, though, and for neo-colonial influence over their governments, though. You see what I mean? Like, this is literally something the British and the French did explicitly to undermine the Soviet imperialist activities in Africa so that they looked more adventitious. This is not a new program that China is deploying here. The Belt and Road Initiative is for building exactly that, belts and roads. What are they for?
Your argument on finance capital.
What are they for? What are those belts and roads for? Production.
Your argument on finance capital, Kara, reminds me of Islam, which forbids interest taking.
Yeah,
and it's more like of a dogmatic point than it is anything else. Because it's not significant. This is not a mass scale. Like the United States does.
It is on a mass scale.
Like incidental.
No, it is on a mass scale.
Attributes.
No, it is. No. They literally are the largest market holder in Africa. How do you hold markets in another country? This is literally, Lenin defined these as components of imperialism. Like, these are the aspects that define an imperialist country. China is an empire, and it is on the level of the US. Actually, it's looking like it's going to outpace the US pretty soon. Because China is the new
that's the whole point. You have to win. Like, the whole point is to win against, the imperial power.
That's not winning against
They're taking on, the imperial power, which is the US.
For us. No, that means nothing for us. China's defeat of the US will not be the end of the US empire. They will prop them up because empires are profitable. That's why the US didn't let the British.
China will not prop up the US empire.
They will because they're profitable.
Their savings of US dollars in US Treasury bonds are liquidated. They're going into gold.
When the US what I'm saying is when the US loses against China, China will prop up their empire because the US is profitable as an empire. It's less profitable if it gets destroyed.
Oh, you mean they will take over the American empire in their own name?
This is no, well, they got their own empire. What I'm saying is the US as an imperial entity will also still exist. So China's victory against US means nothing to us other than a bigger oppressor has come to exist, one that will be more developed than the previous capitalist empire.
But we want to defeat the United States of America.
One second. I'm still making it even harder to revolt because they are a progression of imperialism, which means they are more developed, they are more powerful, like they will be more of a threat. So what will happen is you'll hand the keys over to the bigger guy. That's not helping revolution. That's making it harder. The US, yes, is the big dog right now, but China is bullying the shit out of them, and they are terrified. That's why the US is trying to get conscription legalized, because they want to go to war, because they feel like they need to, and China's bullying them. China's threatening them. China's already threatened to go to war in Taiwan several times in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And Taiwan is not a Han region. Like the Han people that settlerized in that and are now claiming it's all China. No.
Yeah,
no,
that was the native people there. Exiles who ran away from China mainland. They went into Taiwan, took over Taiwan away from the Taiwanese, who are indigenous,
but they're not even
Taiwan.
Called, because Taiwan isn't even the actual original name of the island. I can't remember the original name, but
Formosa.
Formosa. There we go. Thank you, Mark. But
Are we?
what we got to look at is that, like, when we're looking at these kind of relationships, yeah, we need to oppose the US, but we also need to oppose China. Opposing another empire is not going to do us good. That didn't do good when the US took over from the British and were an even more developed empire than the British. And the hope is we'll be even more developed revolutionaries, but that's flipping a coin. And we flipped that coin last time and we fucking fell on our ass. So, like, we really need to be struggling against all forms of imperialism and not being selective because some oppose the United States of America, because that gets into the idea that the US is some unambiguous,
So, okay, yeah,
like,
but you know, like,
all-encompassing
okay,
definition of
China's one thing,
imperialism.
but BRICS. Are you saying that we should oppose BRICS?
Yes, India is
Yes.
also an empire.
Who what?
Brazil is also an empire. They're just regional imperialists, more so than China, that's an international imperialist. But they are still imperialists, and Iran is also a regional imperialist. Like,
You're such
BRICS,
a bloody purist. You can't be
I'm
that
not a
pure.
purist. How am I being a purist for saying that a principle of anti-imperialism must be upheld?
Sure, but you oppose imperialism nonetheless. You know, even though you have imperialists supposedly who are supporting your side, who are supporting the international revolution.
No,
The
because they
international
don't support the
revolution.
international revolution. Imperialists don't do that. Imperialists sabotage international revolution. It's their enemy.
Yes, if we let
Literally
them,
their enemy. Then
but
they
we
know
won't let
that.
them.
No, but by joining them, you will. By believing all this bullshit they tell you that you will. Like, then
Joining them, they're not.
the
We're not
like
joining
trying
them.
to
They're
think that
joining
like the
us.
bourgeoisie is separate from the state in China would be like going, well, the politicians aren't capitalists, so the bourgeoisie is separate from the state in Britain. They're the representatives of the bourgeoisie. They're not the representatives of the working class. The
Okay,
Chinese
well,
government was couped by the bourgeoisie. That's who
actually,
couped
you
it.
have to prove that, you know, with
In
political economic
1976,
analysis.
the Chinese coup. Do you not know about the coup in 1976?
The Dieng counter-revolutionary.
Yeah, with the military. The military couped the government and they shut down the Cultural Revolution. And
Yes,
the
the
bourgeoisie
Cultural
were the ones
Revolution.
who
I
led that
read all the documents of the
counter-revolutionary.
Cultural
Deng was already
Revolution.
booted out of the party. Deng was already booted out of the party for being a bourgeois revisionist.
Okay, yeah. So, but there were gains made in the Cultural Revolution as well. It wasn't defeated.
Those gains were undone.
The
Those
precedent
gains were
exists,
undone.
you
No,
know,
no, it was
as a
defeated.
threat.
It was defeated because many of those gains are undone, smashed to pieces. Like, they
Okay,
made rapid developments
but
in socialism during the Cultural Revolution, in some ways too rapid, and
yeah,
those were smashed to pieces. The
yeah,
only remnants of that
yeah.
still
I
exist
followed the
are in
Shanghai Collective, the
the
Shanghai
only
Commune. It was called.
yes, the Shanghai Commune. They were pretty progressive, and but they went a bit ahead of time in many ways. What's it? There is remnants of this stuff that exists out in the rural areas that's completely abandoned, completely sectioned off in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. That's your remnants of the victories of the Cultural Revolution. I mean, there's some that the liberals have taken on and the fascists that lead the government, but like China is a system that doesn't have bourgeois democracy, but is a bourgeois state. It is a bourgeois system. It's fascism because as
Well, it's a
Hoja pointed
state,
out,
and that's
Hoja
problematic
pointed
in and of itself.
as Hoja pointed out, revisionism is the pathway to the most ferocious kind of fascism that has no that sees no space for bourgeois democracy, that is domineering and is capitalism in a new form. And look at the Soviet Union and China. Is their capitalism not quite peculiar? The Soviet Union had, for most of its time in its capitalist state, the state itself was the bourgeoisie, essentially. Eventually, the politicians became less petty bourgeois and more bourgeois over time. But initially, that's what Khrushchev kind of ended up setting up. The state became
Russia,
the
Soviet Union. You mean the Soviet Union?
And profiteering.
Let me tell you about the
petty,
Soviet Union.
and
My
then
father was in the Soviet Union. Tara,
and
my father was in
I'm
the Soviet Union.
I'm trying to tell you something about economics here. And you're cutting up and going on about your parents being in there. Cool stuff. But I'm trying to talk about economic stuff that I've studied. Like,
that's what I want to talk about.
But no, but I'm in the middle of saying something.
So
and I'm trying to tell you that in that system, the way it ran was that the petty bourgeoisie ran the profit system through the bourgeois state. And that was how they ran a bourgeois system. And then the state operated as the sole outlet of imperialist activities through its institutions.
Yes,
It is a very unique form of capitalism. It's a very unique form of capitalism that you could only find in the works of people like Otto fucking Strasser or Leon Trotsky and some of his revisionist ideas, but he's not even that bad. It's more like Strasserism, like the way Strasser kind of tries to mix like bourgeois ownership and worker councils and all that other fucking wishy-washy crap, and his like radical expectations of capitalism. Soviet Union fit that to a T.
Yes, but you're not talking about the essential nature.
I am talking
you have to use a concept, a Hegelian concept, actually, which is the essence of the matter. What is the essential nature of the phenomena? You're talking about tendencies, attributes.
I'm talking about the base of. I'm talking about the base of the system. What is the state? What does a state represent? A class's power to oppress another class. If the bourgeoisie have cooled the government and taken over the state, who owns the ability to oppress?
But that's it, you see. The Soviet Union didn't have a bourgeoisie. It had developing bourgeoisie within the bureaucracy.
I just told you.
But it was not a bourgeois state, but it was a state.
There was a petty bourgeoisie, and they took over the fucking country because they weren't completely rid of yet.
Yes, but essentially, but in essence, it wasn't a bourgeois state.
The petty bourgeoisie.
That's an attribute. That's a tendency within.
The petty bourgeoisie formed a bourgeois state in the actual institutions itself.
Owned. No, petty bourgeoisie doesn't own a state. That can't be. Petty bourgeoisie is not a bourgeoisie. They cannot own a state. The state in the Soviet Union.
The state. No. That's not what I'm saying. No, you're misinterpreting. It belonged
to the working class.
You are misinterpreting me. You are misinterpreting me. I am telling you that the state owns everything. So there is no private property, but the state acts as the owner and the profiteering element. And then the petty bourgeoisie run the state. And so the petty bourgeoisie, they couped the country and they set the state apparatus up to work this way, to reinstate the bourgeois economic system.
Yeah, but they're not bourgeoisie. They could be fired from their job.
They're petty bourgeoisie. What do you think petty bourgeoisie means?
They are the bourgeoisie. Is not bourgeois. Petty bourgeoisie is not bourgeoisie.
What is a petty bourgeois class interests? To become bourgeois.
A bureaucrat is, if you want to be precise, a bureaucrat is not a petty bourgeois.
I'm not saying
if they were assigned, to operate a factory or something like that,
me again, and
they have total control over a factory. You are
mischaracterizing.
They're not a bourgeois. They're not a petty bourgeois.
Mischaracterizing me again, and it's getting on my nerves. I did not say.
What do you call the head of a functionary in a factory?
Stop. I am not saying being a politician is being petty bourgeois. I'm saying the classes had not been eliminated. The petty bourgeoisie as a class still exists in remission, both those that have been actually expelled from the class and the class that still existed, just like how the remnants of the bourgeoisie still existed in society. The Soviet Revolution had been going on for little time by the time these revisionists were cooking, in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s.
Yes,
it's not like they let me finish. It's not like they just emerged in the 1940s and then took over the country. They've been doing it since the 20s, and the petty bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie worked together to take over the system. Well, there can't be a full re-emergence of the bourgeoisie without the dishing out of private property, at least typically. But they formed a very different form of capitalism that used hybrid economics as a way to form a state that operates as the bourgeois, as in the person who owns private property and earns profit.
We know this all. Che Guevara, he wrote about this. He talked about how they were using methods of organizing the economy in the Soviet Union. We know this.
Yes, but that's not the question. No, but the point I'm making is, if that's the state, that's the essence. The state is the core essence of what a class relationship is.
Not the state. It's the economy that is the essential nature.
It's the state.
And the state was owned by.
No. It's the state
was under.
No.
The only class that had power in the Soviet Union was the working class.
One second.
It was a working class revolution, a real revolution.
Yeah, and it was cooed. It was cooed. And there was not the negation of the negation. So the bourgeoisie can very
Yes,
quickly
but
undo that.
yeah,
But
but
what I'm
still,
trying to,
the
what I'm
only
trying to,
the
what
only
I'm trying
class
to
that
get
was left,
across,
was the
what I'm,
workers and the
what I'm trying
peasants.
to get
There
across
was no
to you.
bourgeoisie.
No. You just
They
said
were
something
expelled.
you said something that's completely incorrect. So you're saying it's not about the state. Okay, well, a state is a representation
It's about
of
the
class.
economy.
So let me finish. A state is a representation of class power. So the proletarian state with new democracy, new economic policy that has a capitalist economy, is that less socialist than a capitalist country with socialist economics in place as a social democratic option?
Completely
Is that
different.
is that now how it works? Is it about the
completely
economy, or is it
different.
about the class that
It's
rules the
completely
fucking
different.
system?
It's completely different,
No. That's what you said. You said it's about economy. So that's not what that question comes to. No, it's about state, because it's about which class owns society. It's about which class rules.
You're talking about
and that's
an
that's what
attribute.
state means. State means the state is a representation, a bureaucratic one, of the ability of one class to oppress another.
Yeah.
That's what a state is. And so a state absolutely is the definitive point of it. And if a bourgeois entity coups a proletarian state, it stops being proletarian.
Yes, but that's not what the Soviet state did.
It is no
the
longer
Soviet state,
proletarian.
in the Civil War in particular, was a workers' and peasants' government and state that
it was a
suppressed the bourgeoisie
but,
and the old aristocracy, feudal aristocracy.
And what happened when it formed its country?
Killed them
it
even.
A proletarian dictatorship. Because that's the point of
it wasn't a proletarian dictatorship. It was a proletarian and peasantry.
No, the proletarian and peasant democracy.
Well, Lenin said it was a democratic dictatorship of the proletariat and the peasantry.
That was the first part of it, but that changed with the new economic policy. They switched it over to the proletarian dictatorship.
Yeah, of course it switched different times.
Because
let me tell you, when my father was in the Soviet Union,
that's what it always was. When the Soviet Union formed, it became a proletarian dictatorship. When it was the RFSFR and they were still struggling and the Civil War was going on, yeah, it was the proletarian peasant democracy dictatorship, whichever word you want to use. But it was always meant to be the proletariat lead and the proletariat form the state. It's just they knew that they couldn't launch to it. So the NEP was the process to change that. And it was a proletarian dictatorship at the formation of the NEP. That's what makes the NEP different to New Democracy. It was a proletarian dictatorship. And that's an important facet.
We know
that's what makes its capitalist development protected and secured. But it being a proletarian dictatorship, it is at risk of counter-revolution. And when counter-revolution happens, that's it. It's down the pan.
But
the only way when Khrushchev took power, the only way that you could have stopped him was by revolting, not coupping like Brezhnev did.
But at the time of the NEP, when it went too far, it was suppressed. It was overcome. It was like the developing bourgeoisie there, not bourgeoisie, but landlords. Was suppressed. No problem, because the essential nature of the state was a worker state. I'll tell you why. My father. One day he had a sore foot, so he didn't go to work, and he went into a doctor's office, a hospital or something, and the doctor said, what's wrong? He sore foot, couldn't go to work. And he says, well, if you could have come to see me, then you could have gone to work. So he didn't give him a note exempting him from that day of work. And because of Trotsky's, a militarization of labor thesis in his two works, Terrorism and Communism, and another one, he was arrested. By whom? By the Communist Party member who was the head of the supposed Soviet in the factory in which he was working, who happened to be a woman and who happened to be a member of the Communist Party, okay? So he gets arrested, put into prison, not even charged, and released, to go back to work. No. Put into prison for 6 months waiting for trial. So he loses 6 months of work because he missed one day of work. This was the capitalist logic that was being used by the bureaucracy. But the essential nature of the state intervened when he came to trial, and the judge said he was acquitted, and he was exempted from compulsory labor thereafter. So the essential nature of the state freed my father from prison. So I know what's going on there.
That doesn't mean the essential nature of the state. We could have a capitalist country.
No.
Listen. What year was this?
It was 1944, probably.
So this was still before revisionism had fully taken power.
Yeah.
Because that was 1956 that they'd done that. So yeah, at that point in time, absolutely the character of the state was proletarian. It wasn't post 1956. Or
So that's
really
why
post Stalin, because like in 1954, the Russians were celebrating 400 years of unity with Ukrainians. Oh, I didn't know invading a country and dominating for 400 years. That would be like if we formed a federation like with England, the Celtic peoples, and like the English then celebrated 800 years of fucking friendship and unity with the Irish. Like that's the kind of way the Soviet Union went in the 50s. They went down the fucking pan and out the
Yeah.
shitter quite quickly.
Yeah.
But that's the point I'm on about. I'm not saying the Soviet Union for its whole time was imperialist. I'm on about the fucking revisionist era. That's what I've been on about.
You know, like all the things
They
that you're
took
talking about now
over the
existed
whole
then as well.
country. They took over the institutions. Georgia revolted against them and they were put down by the fucking Soviet police.
Yes,
took
and the
over the
Soviet Union, you know,
institutions.
helped to create famine as well. You know, it's like, so what?
It's
know?
not so what. Like that's a part of it being a fucking awful little shit.
Yeah, but it was essentially, it was still a worker state.
Not after 1956. No.
Okay, fine. You know, but before 1956, it was still a worker state.
Well,
you
that's
know,
not
like,
what I've been arguing. The whole point I've been trying to point across is about revisionism and its takeovers. I was using 56 to 91 as an example of how China is a fucking fascist imperialist entity. That's what I was trying to do.
Okay.
And you've started an argument with me
Yes,
about
but-
the 40s and
But
before.
you can have attributes of imperialism within a given worker state.
You cannot know. Imperialism is a capitalist entity in function. It is not. If socialism, there's no such thing as socialist imperialism. That sounds like the kind of bullshit the British road to socialism was pushing.
But Russia under the bureaucracy was it's not imperialism, it's not colonialism, it's expansionist, territorially expansionist. Okay, but that's not the same as capitalist imperialism. Mark? Oh, Mark's on the phone. Okay.
No, in the sense of what we talk about from 1956 to 1991, it is capitalist imperialism. And like before then, no, Russia wasn't an imperialist entity in the Soviet Union. They literally, like, I mean, there's problems with the way they did the decolonization. I've got many criticisms, but they were specifically about decolonization. They were specifically about, you know, even development of society, putting colonized peoples in control.
Colonization. I wouldn't call it colonization. It's annexationism.
They did,
because it wasn't it was a political phenomenon.
I mean, what they did in Lithuania, what they did in Lithuania and Latvia and all that was annexationism, but not what they did in the rest of the USSR.
Oh, that's you mean you're talking about territorial annexationism? Well,
but like
two different things,
like,
you know. But it's not imperialism. You know, imperialism is when a private corporation within the host country, the colonial country, implants itself in another country and takes over the sector of the economy for which it's responsible. That's imperialism. Okay.
That's a ridiculously rigid definition of imperialism. No, imperialism is finance capital. That's what it is. If you want to,
this is a great debate between Rosa Luxemburg and Bernstein.
Well, Bernstein, no, it was the great debate between fucking Lenin and the rest of these fucking dipshits. I mean, like, really, like Rosa Luxemburg, I think, was on the right side of this, if I remember rightly. I think she was.
Yes, but she argued against, you know, the thesis that finance capital was dominant in capitalism.
Oh, well, then she's wrong. No, then she's wrong. No,
well,
that's
read her pamphlet.
No, because I couldn't remember the position, but like, no, Lenin was absolutely correct when he pointed out that the development of imperialism was through the buildup of finance capital. Like that's the merging of banking
initially,
and industrial capital.
Because finance capital finances the capitalist corporations to go international, of course.
Well, no, but finance doesn't just mean in the basic terms of finance. It means investment capital. It
means control as well. But the balance of control between finance capital and industrial capital, you know, varies. It's not static.
No, that's not the opposite. No, finance capital involves industrial capital. You mean banking capital and industrial capital. That's what finance capital is. It's the unification of banking, rental, and industrial capital.
Yes. Yeah, they form blocks. Yeah.
Well, they're a unified bloc. They have
Yeah.
spats,
They
but
have
it's
interlocking
usually not as big as
directorships
it
and
is. I
everything
mean,
like that.
when the Nazis said that they were having a spat with the banking lot, they weren't really. They were all in their fucking party and all that. Like same with the
Yeah.
industrialists. Like, but the finance capital is the essence of imperialism. It's its like life force. And so when we see countries investing around the world, like Russia was, or the Soviet Union was during 56 to 91, like China is today, that's not how socialist countries operate. We give aid. We don't financier. We don't loan. We don't like fucking profiteer. We don't, you know, sell stuff to make loads of fucking buck off. We don't act like ransack their resources. We don't turn Cuba into a sugar colony. You know, what we do is we give aid and support, and we help develop countries to be independent. You know, as Jorge said, the need for self-reliancy, so that these countries are not in any way surrogacies to
Yes.
and
Yeah,
so
like
that's the
Libya was
problem.
trying to do with Africa. Yeah.
Well, that's also what China's doing right now. I mean, that's what loans are for.
Libya
That's what loans are
did not
for.
exert control over the economy. You know, Libya was looking for political stature, but Libya was not imperialist towards Africa, and yet they had, you know.
I would disagree with that. I mean, they were oppressing the native population there. We've got to remember that the Libyan government is an Arab government on land that is not natively Arab.
Yes, because
Like
they didn't give
they
equal
were,
status to the Berber tribes, tribes, like the
and
Kabyle. Yes, Algeria does the
Gaddafi
same even nowadays. You know, yeah, I know about Kabyle. Yes.
and
And that's
Gaddafi
one of
as
the reasons
well.
why Gaddafi lost, you know, because he didn't have the support of that sector of the population. You
Well,
know, he was too centered in Tripoli.
also with Gaddafi, you have to remember he's also a massive racist. He sent like a
Yes, he was
letter to the
racist towards the
EU
Black
going
Africans in his
like,
Green Book. I helped to
he was like,
translate it, and it was a very difficult thing, you know, to try to overcome that.
there was also like the letter he sent to like the EU as well, basically being like, "Yo, we should like get along more because these motherfuckers are gonna outpace us eventually, like, and
Oh
they'll
yeah,
outbreed
yeah.
us and then
He
they'll
was into
outgrow
the whole
us."
brown red coalition, which for which I was sacrificed. You know, and I was dumped. You know, from the international, Congress that we held,
Too
that
radical
I
for
was
that kind of
organizing, and then
bullshit.
I
Like
got booted from it. So
Gaddafi was the original Caleb Maupin, I guess.
anyway, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I tried to influence them as well. I did have influence, you know, on Gaddafi and the Green Revolution there, you know, because we developed a theory of a direct and parallel democracy, in which allows for representation of minority nationalities in Central America, which is what I was addressing when I spoke in Caracas on behalf of the direct democracy movement. But in Libya itself, he didn't implement that, and that's one reason why I got
So
chopped down.
see, that's the thing. There was an attraction of revolutionary and reactionary people to Libya, and so you'll find a lot of people that can be real neat and like great to mingle with, but the actual establishment, they were using it as a crux for their own fascist aims. And
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
thing I'm trying to warn about with the Chinese is they might seem good now, but they're imperialists all the same. Like they want domination. Like, and
Yeah, but
they're
I
not gonna
still
go,
worked with
well, you know,
Gaddafi,
good of our
even though I
hearts.
knew what Gaddafi, was making mistakes, like this, but I still worked with him. I tried to have an influence on the
But
revolution there.
Gaddafi, well, it is a little different because he's not the leader of a major imperialist country. Actually, you know
Yeah,
what?
but
He's
you
like,
just said that he was being
no,
imperialist in
I said
Africa.
he engaged in colonization activities. So you can't just like go,
Oh,
well, you
or
know, he's
internally,
expanding his
or
territories. Well, I mean, internally and externally with what went on with Chad and his actions in Burkina Faso, basically helping the French take power. There's a lot of stuff that suggests that he
yeah, I've heard
helped
something about
dispose of
that, but
Tom
they
Sankara.
withdrew from that conflict in any case. They
They
reversed their
did, but
position.
they still tried it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's that
Yeah,
ambition. But
okay.
I will
Yeah,
say that Gaddafi is like not an international imperialist. It's not like Gaddafi is financiering markets in fucking Asia, you know,
mm,
but China's financing markets all throughout Africa. So it's like a real big problem, and we've got to be sort of careful of it. When really what we need to be supporting is the rising anti-imperialist movement that's kind of coming up that's against BRICS and NATO. You know,
ah,
and whatever the
okay.
fuck
But
the
to me, it
EU and
seems
the
like
World
BRICS
Bank
is part of the
does.
anti-imperialist movement.
No, they're not. They're a finance capital institution. It's literally what they are.
Perhaps. And
It's
they
a load of
also
imperialists that
sell a
want
lot of
radio.
oil, you know, like OPEC sells a lot of oil and burns up the planet.
Well, I mean,
But
do you know what OPEC was originally called?
um,
BIPOC.
I have no idea.
British Iranian Petroleum Oil Company, and they're still tied to BP because what happened was British Petroleum and the Iranian oil company, they split. And so you got IOC and BP, but they used to be BIPOC, and they're still closely related companies. They still work hand in hand with each other. So much for the British like opposition of Iran. It always is kind of a load of bullshit. It's always like regionalist shit where they want something that's going on there, so they have to return to the usual racism shit. But if you actually look at the British with the Iran, like usually it's been this weird on and off relationship of fucking getting along with them and then wanting to coup their country and murder them. At the same time as having capitalists that are like closely entwined with the homegrown bourgeoisie of Iran. So
Yeah.
complex point of history, but yeah, IOC
It
is
sounds like the
BIPOC's son.
United States sponsorship of the Palestinian Authority and backing.
Oh God, yeah, no, actually, that's a really good example there.
Very good example of that. Yeah.
God, the Palestinian Authority
But
is
I
such
worked at the Palestine embassy in Ottawa, you know, like I worked with Fatah. I worked with the ambassador, Dr. Abdullah, who was a member of Fatah, member of the political, commission there. But, and also, I had pissed off Arafat in 1980, when I asked him to, give a message to the Jewish people, and he freaked out because of the words Jewish people, and he yelled at me, no. But in 1982, when they needed me, they called me up and, called me in to work in the office, to write. And I wrote everything, I wrote tons of stuff, every day, letters to the 3 different, newspapers, a whole book on Sabra Shatila, plus, letters, like I worked with Fatah. I had to.
I know, and let's say you got to do what you have to in that kind of situation, obviously. And when we're
but they
talking
were the
about
bourgeoisie. Fatah's the bourgeoisie, even though they're a member of the Social Second International. Like a member of Second International Socialist Party.
They're the bourgeoisie of an oppressed nation fighting a war of national liberation. So they're in a progressive point at the moment. They're one of the few parts of the bourgeoisie that are progressive. Like there's really rare shit like this. And it changes because once they get into power, well, that's what happened with Fatah. Fatah's not progressive anymore. Once the Palestinian Authority was properly formed, they just stabbed shit in the back. And
they arrest Palestinians because they're told to by Israel. Like it's that bad.
And that's how Hamas came to rise as well, because Fatah basically left a window open. Well, the PLO in general left a window open with the way that they fucked everything up.
It's called corruption, but it's political corruption more so.
The Zionists kind of got their grubby piss-stained hands on Fatah's willingness to try and like be more peaceful about how they cooperated rather than just going for all-out war, and they took advantage of it. And I mean, Arafat himself kind of eventually redeemed himself in the end, but he set a lot of this shit that's fucked Fatah up. So it's like, I don't know, how do you want to dice it? I've got respect for Arafat. Like he had his problems, but he was definitely someone who cared.
Struggle. I stood at attention at his mausoleum there,
I know. I got the video on my channel. It's a beautiful, the picture with the music playing on the channel.
With the 2 soldiers. I asked the soldiers if I could do it, and they said sure.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I want to go back. I want to go back to Palestine. Okay. So we've done it. We have done it. We have launched the Convergence Forum to the world.
And we've kind of shown that like we don't negate the fact that we have disagreements. We're gonna argue it out. Ruthless criticism goes down pretty hardcore in the Convergence, and people respect and love each other dearly, even though we have our disagreements.
Thank you. My.
No, I mean, it's important. How else are we gonna fucking fight for a free world if we're gonna fucking be at the throats of colonized brethren? As someone of Irish heritage, it's a duty of mine to be at the sort of you know, full attention when it comes to how I ascertain towards solidarity around the world. Like I got a responsibility both at how Ireland's kind of like in later years, we've been a bit of a letdown of how shit's kind of gone. I mean, not like it's entirely our fault, but we definitely fucked up. Like, if a revolution fails, it's the fault of the vanguard. And so, you know, we need to kick our shit back together. But also from the fact that we were like a big point of inspiration to the world. So it's like
Yeah.
that brethrenhood of us colonized people is at the center point of how I like operate and interact with my revolutionary love.
Yeah, I really appreciated the photo of the mural that you sent out, you know, like showing the PLO and the IRA together. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, one struggle, Tiak Fidel, our time will come.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. We should tell people, you know, like where we're from, you know, because like it's like really important that we're so,
Mhm.
you know, diverse internationally, you know, like
Yes.
you, Kara, are in the imperial center there of finance capital in England, Great Britain, so-called, the
Fucking
United Kingdom of King
God,
Charles.
God, King Charlemagne the Third. Oh gosh, golly, there's another Charlemagne in power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
I do have the joys of English heritage, but I am mostly Celtic. I'm Irish, Scots Gaelic of Clan Donachide, and I'm also Cymraeg, which is like the proper name for like Welsh, or you know, Wales is Cymru. You know, Wales is actually an old German ethnic slur that means like Xeno
Oh.
people. Um, yeah. Like, and as if
And
the Germans didn't know who the Celts were. Like, they fucking grew up alongside us. It's like, what the fuck do you mean, alien people, you little shits? Like, especially the Anglo-Saxons, given that the Anglos, Uitlanders, Saxons, and Fricks fought
the
with us against
Saxons from
Romans.
Saxony. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Because
And
when
then
they
they
came
consider
over as
themselves to be so
mercenaries with the
pure. The
Romans,
Anglo-Saxons, you know, they're a pure race, even though
Mhm.
even though
obviously we
they're a
come from at
hodgepodge.
least two sources called Anglo and two
Mhm.
Saxon. That's why it's called
Well, there's actually
Anglo-Saxon.
four ethnic groups that make it up because you have the
Yeah.
Anglos, the Uitlanders, the Fix, and the Saxons, and
Uh,
they actually came over separately at first into the UK
yeah.
with the Romans because the Romans used them as like settler mercenaries, but then they
Uh,
betrayed the Romans, joined the Celts, fought against the Romans, and then
ah.
settlements formed by those people that stayed. And then eventually the Anglo-Saxons did their little Super Saiyan unite and then came and invaded um, very professional language, came and invaded the UK, and then that's when you get the big Anglo-Saxon invasion. And I think it was either the 6th or the 7th century. I think it was the 7th. At 7th was definitely when they were fighting against King Arthur, but they might have started in the 6th. Because these older wars were always like slower burners. Like, look at how long the Viking wars are going on for. Huge.
Okay. So that's very exotic of you. Very, yes. Now, Mark, you're very exotic too, you know, like what are you doing in that way out of the place that somehow, you know, like near the on 4 kilometers from the border with Mexico and
Yes.
in a state
Almost in
that
freedom.
that is like, you know, completely different from the rest of the world called Texas.
Yeah, it's right
Yeah.
down the road. Well, I call this non-Texas Texas because it's nothing like the rest of the state. It's developed really in isolation from the rest of Texas because it's the interstate system, for example. Um, they just finished 2 parts of the interstate here, but they're not connected to the rest of the interstate system. So nobody comes down here. Um, most people here have no Texas accent. Either
Oh,
people have a
too bad.
Mexican American accent or a Midwestern accent.
Uh,
And it's a very strange place. I've only been here for 2 years. Moved down here from Kansas, but born and raised in New York City.
yeah, you have a New York accent, right?
I guess New York with a lot of theater and radio training. So I tried to get rid of the D's, dem, and does.
You
Could
know
you
what? You
give
have
us, you know,
tried to
some
like
sort of a New York, you know, expression that sounds New Yorkese? How would you be identified as a New Yorker, you know?
Well,
in
I
expression.
used to say I was from New York.
Ah, that's it. That's what I wanted to hear.
New
Yeah.
York.
New York.
Yeah.
I'm walking here.
Well, no, that's more Bostonian. In Boston, they would say New York,
Ah,
but
Oh
yeah,
in
yeah,
well,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm doing the funny thing that like Canadians do, where they try to do New Yorker and they sound like Bostonians. So I'm living up to the Toronto dream. Actually, that's probably like colonization and genocide. I probably don't want to live up to that. But fucking bullying the Canadians aside, um, you kind of have like with the sort of twang that's been added in, it's kind of like you've just ruralized yourself a little bit as well. I mean, there's some southern sounds that I'm hearing in it as well. There's a little bit
with
of
me,
yeah, like some of the tones like sound a bit, but not like you actually have a southern accent. It's just certain throaty sounds I'm hearing that sound like the Scots Irish influence in
I
America.
lived in the deep South, Mississippi, Georgia, twice for 17 years,
Could be the
and
Georgian influence because Georgia has like a really distinct southern accent.
but my voice is basically from what I learned in acting school, which I used back when I was a radio newscaster.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's what your voice is.
But
International English. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah. What
but
used
Yeah,
it's
to be
that's a
like
big.
called General American Standard, but that term has fallen out of use. Most people don't like it because there's more of a feeling in the U.S. now that regional accents should be okay, similar to what happens in the U.K. That it used to be that only the King's or Queen's English was acceptable, like on the BBC and other broadcast outlets, and now you hear a lot more
Same here
regional
in Montreal, we're
accents.
only Parisian French was, like taught
Mhm.
for now Quebecois. You can hear it on the radio, all the radio stations, love talking Quebecois because it gets more attention,
A
because
lot
that's
of
what people
slang
want to
it
hear.
expressions
sounds.
that people in France can't understand.
I mean, what's
Who
it? I mean,
cares about France anyway?
I mean, Quebecois is like they actually speak the French properly anyway. So, like, it's the French fault for speaking like the Paris, where they do not speak the French properly. That's
Mhm.
not how French used to be spoken. Like Paris, the way it's spoken today is like kind of like I mean, my stereotypical thing was not how they really speak it, but they do like drop the last end of like the last what's it syllable on words. They don't
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah.
accents on it, and that's not how you're originally meant to speak
Except
French.
except
You're
for
actually
a
meant to pronounce
CRF
the
and L,
accents.
but it's and occasionally other words, but mostly if they're imported words, then you'll pronounce the final letter. But
OK, mais
generally,
ici au Montréal, on parle français, français québécois, compris?
oui, oui.
That's what Quebecois French is.
Yes, and also
It's different than, France
the
French.
on, and sounds which don't exist in any other language. So,
Mm.
I mean, it's because there's a lot of like funny things with French that people just like assume because AIS usually gets silented, although there's some French dialects that don't. You have Du Bois. Everyone calls him Du Bois. Please stop calling him Du Bois.
Dubois,
I will find you if you
Dubois.
call
Well,
him
it's
Du Bois. Anyone who watches this
Dubois.
from now on, if you call WDB Du Bois, I will find you. I
Well,
will
in
know
the
who
U.S.,
you
he is
are the
called Du
moment
Bois
you do it.
Yeah, but yeah,
because he
okay.
called himself Du Bois.
Yeah, that's his name. It's to pronounce
Mhm.
Du Bois.
But in French, it's Dubois.
Dubois, right? Dubois.
Yeah,
That U letter
yeah, yeah.
in there, which also exists in German.
Uh-huh.
That
Well,
sound.
okay, and I'm here in Montreal, Quebec, which is supposedly part of Canada, but we don't believe that. And yesterday we had our National Day of liberation, except we're not liberated. So I was in the park, and I spoke with a clown about this, and we agreed that independence is on its way, because there was a friend, from Algeria, and I mentioned, that Algeria also has its National Day on the 5th of July,
Yes.
but they can celebrate their independence, and Quebec has yet to be able to celebrate its independence. So he is really happy, this clown, and he gave me a high five, and I gave him a high five, and it was perfectly, synchronized. So when we hit, it created this big clap, that resonated throughout the whole park. Anyway,
I was rooting for René Lévesque. I was rooting for René Lévesque.
yeah, I came
Back
here to
during
hear
his
him in Montreal when
but
I
he
was still living
failed.
in Toronto. Yeah, he gave up, too easily. He was such
Yes, he
a
did.
petit bourgeois. Kara, are you dying?
Yeah, I what's it?
What's happening?
I
Sounds
forgot
like
to
you have a
take my
cold.
tablet before the stream started, so my nervous system has been running at like 1,000,000 miles an hour for this stream.
Yeah. Okay. So let's
Okay.
finish here and then take a rest. Okay. Now's the time. Me too. My leg is hurting, from sitting in this
Actually, I have
position for
another
so
stream to
long.
do. Literally, I've got to go do planning for another stream that's going to happen in like an hour. No sleep for
I
the
think
wicked.
I'm the only one who can end it. So when you want me to end it, just tell me and I'll end it.
Well,
I
I
can
would
end my
like to.
recording here.
I would
So
like to
But if I
say,
end it, it will end our. I'm not.
yes,
Is
it
there
would
is
end
there a way to
everything.
end
Yeah.
it without
wait one
actually
second.
ending?
For the sake of the recording, which I'm going to upload to YouTube, my YouTube channel, and you can too. Any words of conclusion?
Oh, stop recording. There it is.
I would,
Stop
yeah, I would, I'd like to say, Seos Don Palestine, like
recording.
the main article of anyone's consciousness right now, actively, especially in the imperial core, but internationally speaking, through solidarity, needs to be Palestine, the Sudan, the Congo, the situation going on in Kenya right now, which is a British colony. People need to remember the British still have
Was, yeah.
military bases in Kenya. The military still does the activities there. They have an outlet there that operates throughout Africa. So, like, my last message would be that, like, there's so much genocide going on right now around the world, and we need to be wholehearted at this. We need to keep on this struggle for Palestine, and then also do it for Sudan and everywhere else. Like, we need to be pushing for like constant solidarity with these genocides. It can't be a situation where Palestine is being genocided for 70 fucking 6 years, and we just keep turning up every now and then to show some solidarity, and then when they ease up, we disappear. Non-stop support for Palestine. Their liberation is a requirement for our own.
Yeah. And I would take this opportunity to say in Yiddish, Los mir leben in einem mit Seichel, Shitvis, and Shulam. That's the only time I get to speak Yiddish ever. There's
You
like
should
nobody
speak
around
Yiddish
that
more.
speaks Yiddish
Yiddish is
anymore. Nobody
you-
else knows Yiddish.
you
Like
should
I'm the
speak-
only one who speaks Yiddish anymore in the whole world.
Oh, in New York, there's a large Yiddish-speaking community. in New
Yeah,
York.
but they won't speak with me.
you need to go get out
Okay.
there sometime, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, you can find someone that
There
can.
are
I have
two
to go to
Yiddish
the
newspapers in New York
Meir
City.
Sharim
Like-
neighborhood in Jerusalem. I'll go there and live with the Hasidim.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you should speak Yiddish more often. Like,
Yeah.
it's why I
I
need to
will
learn my
in
own
Palestine
native
when the
language.
soldiers come and speak to me in Hebrew. I'll speak to them in Yiddish.
I mean, they have to accommodate it.
No, one guy
No, they don't. No,
taped
they
him
don't.
as well.
They're
Got
supposed to.
35,000
That's
views.
what the rules are. If they
And
tell
the
you
guy,
no,
the
then
soldier,
break the rules.
said, like I asked him to speak in Yiddish to me, and he said, no, and I said, yeah, that's why you're a Zionist and I'm Jewish, And there was a journalist, a Palestinian journalist, who also got a tape of this and broadcast it on two networks, and it got 35,000 views.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I get to use my Yiddish from time to time.
Yeah, no, I
Especially
mean,
there.
and fuck the sort of supremacy around Hebrew. Like, Hebrew has a
Ah.
really importance to the Jewish people, but the way it's supremacally pushed when Yiddish has been at
So artificial.
the heart and soul of like Jewish struggle. Yiddish is proletarian, fucking, in its
Yes.
Yes,
content.
and also
That's what
originally,
Lenin
My
pointed
father
out. Lenin
knew a few
said
words,
that
but they
in
never
criticism. Lenin criticized the
taught me in
Bund
it.
in 1907. Lenin criticized the Bund and said to the Bund that if you were to choose Hebrew, you would be taking the bourgeoisie over the proletariat. The Yiddish is the language spoken most by the Jewish people. 83% of the Bundist Party, membership spoke Yiddish. If they changed all their shit to Hebrew only, no one would be able to understand shit. It destroyed the movement, and they know it.
Yeah. So we continue, okay? Let's try to get together, on a weekly basis. Very good. Okay. And this is it.